A terrifying virus, similar to rabies, is spreading rapidly. Once infected, humans lose their sanity and become highly aggressive. One morning, Manel is woken up by his cat and heads downstairs. On the news, a shocking report is being broadcast. An unknown virus is sweeping the globe, and experts are considering closing the borders. They also warn citizens to stay safe and avoid going outside. Manel brushes it off, thinking it's just another wave of COVID-19. After feeding his cat, he gets in his car and heads out to the nearby supermarket to stock up on supplies. However, when he arrives, he notices everyone inside is panic buying. Manel thinks they're overreacting and doesn't feel the need to be as anxious as they are. But when he gets home, his sister's call makes him pause. Since Bolin works for the government, she has access to more insider information. She tells Manel that the virus outbreak is far worse than expected. For safety reasons, the government plans to evacuate them to the Canary Islands the next evening. Concerned, Bolin urges Manel to join her and leave. The growing sense of unease makes Manel cautious. The next day, after packing his bags, he rushes to the airport with his cat. However, when it's time to board, everyone's identification is suddenly invalid. The flight schedules on the big screen begin to be canceled one by one. The crowd immediately falls into a panic, fearing that the government intends to trap them here. An argument breaks out between the passengers and the airport staff. Suddenly, everyone's phones start ringing. It's a high-level security alert. The virus has mutated, and the government has imposed strict travel bans, preventing anyone from leaving or entering the country. At the same time, Bolin calls again, urging Manel to return home immediately. Outside the airport, the roads leading home are completely blocked. With no other option, Manel abandons his car and begins to walk back with his cat. But when he reaches his neighborhood, he finds that the police have sealed off the entrance. Manel approaches to ask what's going on, but the police force him to leave. Nearby, a woman is crying in distress, making Manel feel even more uneasy. Sure enough, he sees a man, bound and restrained by the police, thrashing wildly like an animal. His horrifying screams send chills down everyone's spine. After witnessing the terrifying scene, Manel returns home, utterly exhausted, and collapses into a deep sleep. The next day, Bolin calls again with more bad news. Due to the appearance of a new virus variant, the lockdown may last much longer than expected. She urges Manel to stay indoors and avoid going out. Later, Manel heads to the supermarket to stock up on supplies, but the shelves are already completely bare. He can only scrounge together a few discarded items. As he exits, military jets occasionally fly overhead, signaling that things are rapidly escalating. Manel then heads to a gas station to continue gathering whatever supplies he can find. Just as he's about to leave, he sees an injured police officer stumbling toward him and quickly locks himself inside the supermarket. Before Manel can understand what's happening, he hears cries for help from a distance. Suddenly, he witnesses zombies attacking and bringing the officer to the ground. Manel grabs a weapon and rushes over to help, but the injured police officer manages to save Manel just in time. But before he can even catch his breath, he watches in horror as the officer from earlier undergoes a terrifying transformation, begins relentlessly banging on the glass. Confused and unsure of what to do, Manel tries to approach, but the officer raises his gun and warns him not to come any closer. Then, to Manel's shock, the officer turns the gun on himself. Back home, Manel watches the news, where the military announces plans to relocate civilians to safe zones. That night, however, Bolin calls and urges Manel to avoid getting caught in the police sweep, insisting that he must not get on the transport vehicles. With no other choice, Manel spends the night reinforcing his doors and windows. When the police finally arrive at his place, he remains completely silent, narrowly escaping their notice. 2 weeks pass, and due to the lack of phone signals, Manel and Balin lose contact. Meanwhile, Manel's stockpiled food is nearly gone, forcing him to take the risk of venturing outside in search of supplies. Unfortunately, his efforts prove fruitless as several stores yield no results. Reluctantly, he moves on to the next one, only to be surprised by the sight of an elderly woman sitting inside. It turns out she is unable to leave due to her leg disability. Although she has no food, she knows exactly where supplies can be found. Guided by the elderly woman, Manel manages to gather a considerable amount of food and even finds a motorcycle. This greatly expands his range of movement. Not forgetting the woman's kindness, Manel shares the supplies he's found with her. Together, they keep each other company, enduring the long, lonely nights. One night, Manel is suddenly awakened by the elderly woman who asks him to turn on the radio. It turns out there is a survivor camp not far from their location, by the river mouth. Since their food is nearly gone, Manel decides to take the elderly woman to the camp in hopes of finding supplies. However, the elderly woman, knowing that she is unable to move, doesn't want to be a burden on the kind-hearted Manel. In an attempt to spare him, she chooses to take pills and end her life. When Manel arrives and sees her lifeless body, he is deeply saddened. He steps out of the room, preparing to go back home and pack his things. Suddenly, a zombie attacks him. Manel climbs onto the roof of the car to escape, but the zombie grabs his ankle and pulls him down. The zombie sinks its teeth into his wrist, but luckily, Manel had put on a wetsuit earlier, preventing the teeth from piercing through. He manages to knock the zombie down again and quickly opens the car door to kill it. The zombie continues to struggle, but Manel quickly picks up a harpoon lying on the ground and shoots the zombie in the head before it can attack again. This time, the zombie is completely still. Manel, still shaken and terrified, realizes that this place is no longer safe. After sending Balin his final message, he hops on his bike and heads toward the survivor camp by the river. The roar of the motorcycle engine through the forest path attracts a swarm of zombies, which begin to chase Manel, claws outstretched and snarling. Fortunately, the speed of the motorcycle keeps the zombies at bay, making it difficult for them to catch up. After a tense ride, Manel finally reaches the camp, but to his horror, it has already fallen. As soon as he arrives, he is surrounded by a large group of zombies. He slams the throttle and speeds off, narrowly escaping. However, a pile of corpses by the roadside startles him, causing him to lose control and crash. He quickly grabs his cat and lifts the motorcycle, but the impact has damaged the bike, preventing it from starting. With zombies closing in, Manel has no choice but to abandon the motorcycle. He takes the cat and starts running as fast as he can. The zombies continue to swarm behind him, steadily growing into a massive horde. Manel reaches the dock and quickly shuts the door, blocking the zombies outside. But soon, cracks start to spread across the glass, and it's clear the door won't hold for much longer. Fortunately, Manel spots a small boat nearby. He places the cat on the shore and dives into the water, making his way to the yacht. Unfortunately, the yacht won't start. Just as he's about to lose hope, Manel spots a small dinghy. He decides to use it to reach the island where Balin is, but halfway there, the engine suddenly cuts out. It seems like he's hit something, and the boat comes to a complete stop. As Manel is about to give in to despair, a bright light appears behind him. He quickly raises his arms, shouting to get the attention of the passing ship. In the end, Manel is rescued and brought aboard. At this point, the captain and his crew come over, but unfortunately, there's a language barrier. Luckily, Prochenko, who's with the captain, speaks the language of Manel's country and acts as a translator. Manel tells them that he knows of a survivor camp and can lead them there. The captain then asks what Manel does, and he responds that he's a lawyer. However, Prochenko translates it as engineer, because in the apocalypse, there's little need for lawyers, and those who are considered useless are only fit for emergency food supplies. That night, as Manel drifts in and out of sleep, he's suddenly awoken by loud noises. Looking through the window, he sees more survivors arriving. But strangely, the next day, Manel doesn't see anyone from last night aboard the ship. He goes to ask the captain where they went, but Prochenko insists that no one had boarded the ship the night before. Turning around, Manel spots a burly man on the deck, rummaging through the survivors' luggage from the previous night. Manel immediately realizes that this group of people is not to be trusted. So, he goes to Prochenko again, telling him that he knows of a hospital with a helicopter, and that they could head there to reach a safe zone guarded by the military. But Prochenko advises Manel to stay quiet if he wants to survive. Realizing he can't convince Prochenko, Manel sneaks into the crew quarters in the middle of the night, planning to steal his kayak keys and escape. However, as he passes by the cargo hold, he can't shake the feeling of unease and decides to go in. Inside, he finds the survivors he saw earlier, locked up. But the woman from that group is already gone, likely eaten by the others. Manel, feeling guilty, decides to set them free. Just as he's finishing untying the survivors, they're caught. In a desperate moment, Prochenko arrives just in time and strangles one of the attackers with a rope. With the survivors freed, the three of them rush to the kayak. But before they can escape, they're spotted by the attacker's accomplices. One of the survivors is shot dead on the spot, leaving only Manel and Prochenko to escape under heavy fire. Prochenko is shot in the shoulder, but the two of them drive quickly to the hospital. However, when they arrive at the base of the building, there's no sign of the helicopter on the rooftop. Lost in thought, Manal is suddenly startled when a zombie lunges at their car. In an instant, the zombie's blood splatters across their windshield. Manal slams on the brakes, sending the zombie flying, then grabs his submachine gun and takes it down for good. But the gunfire attracts more zombies nearby. Helping Pachenko, Manal enters the hospital, determined to find tools to remove the bullet from his shoulder. As they move deeper into the building, Manal notices sounds coming from the ventilation system above. He crouches to listen more closely and realizes there are other survivors inside the hospital. Manal's movement draws the attention of a zombie, but with quick reflexes, he creates some distance and takes it out with a single shot from his harpoon gun. However, more and more zombies are closing in, and Manal feels trapped. With no other choice, he runs back to the operating room and quickly locks the door behind him. But when he looks at the operating table, he realizes Pachenko is missing. Even worse, the door begins to shake under the relentless assault of the zombies. Just when things seem hopeless, a hidden door suddenly opens. Manal doesn't hesitate and rushes through it, narrowly avoiding being overrun by the horde. It turns out that the people who had been hiding in the ventilation ducts were other survivors, and the missing Pachenko had also been saved by them here. The nurse informs Manal that the hospital does have a helicopter, but to reach it, they must cross a yard filled with zombies. With food running out in the hospital, the nurse decides to help Manal get to the helicopter and escape. But before they can make any moves, gunfire suddenly echoes from downstairs. It's the group of bandits from earlier. Not wasting any time, the group rushes to the corridor. The door has been damaged and can only be broken open, and then... Although the zombies are killed, the nun is still infected. Knowing that she's already infected, she refuses to leave and turns to face the horde, buying the others some time. With heavy hearts, the group continues their journey. As they pass through the warehouse, a girl spots her mother in the crowd of zombies and can't help but cry out. In that critical moment, gunfire suddenly rings out from outside. Through a crack, Manal sees that the bandits have coincidentally arrived to rescue them. Once reunited, they look out the window and see the yard. Feeling a surge of hope, they just need to get across that open space, and they can take the helicopter to safety. But the path ahead is not easy. Manal looks at the cages in the room and suddenly comes up with an idea. He uses several fences to create a circle and places the children in a stroller, so the zombies can't reach them. They cautiously begin to move forward, but as the stroller hits a bump, the noise immediately attracts the attention of the nearby zombies. A large group of zombies quickly surrounds them. Fortunately, the fence provides some protection, so the group just needs to focus on dealing with the zombies climbing over. However, despite this, their situation is still incredibly dangerous. Luckily, the open area they need to cross isn't far. After a short while, they finally reach the spot where the helicopter is parked. The nurse swiftly chops through the lock, and once the children and others are inside, Manal tightly secures the iron gate. Just as he's about to board the helicopter, he's shocked to see a few zombies leap over the fence. These must have been athletes in their former lives. At that moment, gunfire suddenly erupts from the side. It turns out that the bandits have caught up. With their overwhelming firepower, they quickly carve a path through the zombies. Faced with the dark muzzles of their guns, Manal has no choice but to surrender. The bandits demand that everyone get off the helicopter. At that moment, Pachenko on the helicopter gives Manal a subtle look. Countless zombies charge toward the bandits, and before they can react, the group is instantly overwhelmed and consumed by the horde. Pachenko quickly takes off in the helicopter, and the nurse throws down a rope ladder. At the last second, Manal manages to grab hold of the ladder and escape. Soon, the helicopter soars over the ocean, heading toward their hoped-for destination. Just then, the signal finally comes back, and Manal receives a call from Balin. Excited, he tells her that he's on his way. But the next second, Balin's face turns pale with fear, urging them to turn back immediately. As they look up, two fighter jets roar past overhead, and the people on the helicopter are filled with despair.